The day I found out about Robert's other life, I was cleaning our attic. 50 years of marriage packed into dusty boxes. And there it was, a phone bill with calls to a Philadelphia number I didn't recognize. Weekly calls, sometimes lasting hours, going back months. I could have dismissed it, but something pulled at me. That evening, while Robert was at his investment club meeting, I called the number. A woman answered, her voice warm and familiar. "Wilson Residence," she said. "My husband's last name. My last name." But this wasn't my home. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "I think I have the wrong number," I whispered, my fingers trembling as I hung up. After 5 decades together, I discovered my husband had built an entire second life just 2 hours away. I never imagined that at 70 years old I'd be starting over. But I had something Robert didn't know about, a passport I'd kept hidden since before we married, a small account my mother insisted I maintain, and a promise I'd made to myself long ago that I never thought I'd have to keep. This is how I lost everything I thought defined me, and found myself instead. I met Robert Wilson in 1972 at a faculty mixer. I was 20, a junior studying literature and education at Barnard College with dreams of teaching overseas. He was 22, confident in his perfectly pressed suit, already working at his father's bank. My roommate nudged me when he walked over. "That one's going places," she whispered. How right she was, just not in the way any of us expected. We married a year after I graduated. The semester I'd planned in Florence became a honeymoon instead. "We'll go back someday," Robert promised as I tucked my passport into my keepsake box. "When we're settled." Settled. That word shaped the next 50 years of my life. I gave up the overseas teaching position I'd been offered to build a life in Riverside, Connecticut. We bought a colonial on Maple Street with a garden I tended. Religiously. I taught literature at the local high school while Robert climbed the ranks at Wilson Financial. We had Jennifer in our 3rd year of marriage, and I stepped back from full-time teaching to raise her. Jennifer was our pride and joy, brilliant and determined like her father. She married Daniel, had Tyler, and built a life that mirrored ours. In so many ways. Sunday dinners became our tradition. The whole family gathered around my dining table, talking about Jennifer's latest promotion or Tyler's baseball tournaments. From the outside, we were the picture of American success. When Robert turned 65, he didn't fully retire as planned. "Just consulting," he explained, still making weekly trips to New York and occasional banking conferences that took him away for days at a time. I never questioned it. Why would I? We'd built a life on trust, or so I thought. That trust began to fracture the day I found the phone bill. My hands shook as I dialed the number again the next morning, after Robert had left for the city. This time I didn't hang up. "Hello?" the same woman answered. "I'm calling about Robert Wilson," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. A pause. "My husband isn't home right now. May I ask who's calling?" My husband. 2 words that shattered. Half a century of memories. "This is Maggie Wilson," I said. "His wife." The silence that followed seemed eternal. Then came a small, strangled sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "I think we need to talk," she finally said. Eleanor Moran was 68, an art gallery owner who'd met Robert at a financial planning seminar in Philadelphia 23 years ago. She didn't know about me at first. By the time she discovered Robert had a wife in Connecticut, she was already in love with him. He had compartmentalized his life perfectly. Weekdays with me in Riverside, many weekends and business. Trips with Eleanor in Philadelphia. "He told me you had an arrangement," Eleanor said when we met at a cafe halfway between our homes. "That you preferred your independence, that your marriage was in name only." I laughed, a hollow, painful sound. Independence? I've spent 50 years building our home, supporting his career, raising our daughter. There was never any arrangement. Eleanor looked as devastated as I felt. Her hands, adorned with an elegant diamond ring that mirrored my own, trembled as she showed me photos on her phone. Robert at what appeared to be holiday gatherings with her family, vacations I thought he'd taken for work, even a small ceremony on a beach somewhere tropical. Not legally binding, but meaningful to them. "He has keys to my home," she said softly. "He keeps clothes there. He has a relationship with my nephews and nieces. He's helped my brother through cancer treatments. I don't understand how he managed this for so long." Neither did I. The Robert I knew was methodical, sometimes distant, but I'd always attributed that to his focus on providing for us. Now I realized that focus had been divided in ways I couldn't comprehend. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through decades of memories, reframing them with this new knowledge. The business trips that grew more frequent over the years. The separate checking account for investment opportunities. The way he'd grown increasingly private about his schedule. His phone always password protected. When I got home, I went straight to our bedroom and opened the keepsake box I'd maintained through our marriage. Inside, beneath old photos and Jennifer's childhood drawings, was my passport. Expired long ago, but a symbol of the life I might have had. Next to it was my mother's letter, given to me the day before my wedding. "Keep something of your own, Maggie," she'd written. "Even in the happiest marriage, a woman should have her escape hatch." At 21, I'd thought her old-fashioned and unnecessarily cautious. At 70, I finally understood her wisdom. That night, when Robert came home, I said nothing. I served the salmon he preferred, listened to his stories about meetings in New York, and excused myself early, claiming a headache. In the guest room, I lay awake planning my next steps. The following day, I visited Marcus Chen, a family law attorney Jennifer had used during her brief separation from Daniel years earlier. 50 years, Marcus whispered after I explained my situation. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm so sorry." "Please call me Maggie," I said. Mrs. Wilson apparently refers to two different women. Marcus walked me through my options. Connecticut was an equitable distribution state. Assets acquired during marriage would be divided fairly, though not necessarily equally. Robert's deception would factor into the court's decisions. The separate accounts I'd discovered could be considered marital assets, hidden in bad faith. "What about the house in Philadelphia?" I asked. Marcus looked puzzled. "What house?" I realized then that Eleanor had said Robert had keys to her home, not their home. Had I misunderstood something fundamental? My next stop was the bank where I'd maintained my personal account all these years, a modest savings that Robert knew nothing about. My mother had insisted I keep it, adding to it from the small inheritance she left me. It wasn't much, but it was enough for what I needed to do next. I renewed my passport, booked a ticket to Florence, and made an appointment with a real estate agent there. The semester abroad I'd sacrificed for marriage was finally going to happen. 50 years late, but perhaps right on time. I didn't tell Jennifer about any of this yet. My daughter idolized her father, and I needed to understand the full picture before bringing her into this nightmare. Instead, I told her I was considering a trip to Italy, a lifelong dream Robert and I had discussed, for retirement. "That's wonderful, Mom," she exclaimed over the phone. "Dad's always saying you should travel more. I'll help you plan." Her innocent comment struck me like a physical blow. Had Robert been setting the stage for his eventual departure? Creating a narrative where I was independent, fulfilled, with my own interests separate from him? The thought made me physically ill. 3 days after my discovery, I finally confronted Robert. I waited until after dinner, when he was settled, in his study with the financial papers he reviewed each evening. "I spoke with Eleanor yesterday," I said from the doorway, watching his face carefully. His expression shifted microscopically, a slight widening of the eyes, a tightness around the mouth, before settling into confusion. Eleanor? I don't think I know an Eleanor. The practiced ease of his lie stunned me more than the lie itself. How many times had he looked me in the eye and fabricated reality? Eleanor Moran, I continued calmly. From Philadelphia. Your other wife. Robert's facade cracked then, just for a moment, before he recovered. Maggie, that's absurd. Are you feeling all right? I placed the phone bill on his desk, along with printouts of bank transfers I'd found going to an account in Philadelphia. For years. 23 years, Robert. Almost half our marriage. He stared at the papers, then at me, calculation visible behind his eyes. I'd seen that look before when he was working through complex financial problems. I was just another problem to solve now. It's not what you think, he finally said, his voice measured. It never is, I replied. I've already spoken with a lawyer. That got his attention. Robert had always been concerned with appearances, with his standing in the community. A public divorce, especially one involving infidelity and deception, would damage the sterling reputation he'd cultivated. We should discuss this rationally, he said, standing up. There's no need for lawyers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We can work this out between ourselves. Like you worked things out with Eleanor? I asked. Does she know you've been married to me for 50 years? Does she know about Jennifer? About Tyler? Robert's face paled. This is complicated, Maggie. Actually, it's quite simple, I said, surprised by my own calm. You've been living a double life for decades. Now I get to decide how mine continues. That night, Robert slept in the guest room. The next morning, he left early, claiming an urgent meeting in New York. I knew he was going to Philadelphia, probably to damage control with Eleanor. I took the opportunity to call Jennifer and ask her to come over. Telling my daughter about her father's betrayal was the hardest conversation of my life. Jennifer sat at my kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared family meals for decades, and listened in stunned silence. That's impossible, she whispered when I finished. Dad wouldn't. He couldn't have hidden something like this for so long. I thought the same thing, I replied gently. But I've spoken with Eleanor. I've seen the evidence. Jennifer shook her head, tears streaming down her face. There must be some explanation. Dad's devoted to you, to our family. He's been devoted to 2 families, I corrected her. And now we all have to figure out what that means for us. Jennifer left in a state of confusion and distress, promising to speak with her father directly. I knew Robert would have a carefully crafted narrative ready for her, one that minimized his betrayal and possibly even shifted blame to me for being distant or unavailable in some way. I had to prepare myself for the possibility that my daughter might choose to believe him. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Connor, Eleanor's nephew. Mrs. Wilson, he said, his voice hesitant. My aunt told me what's happening. I thought you should know something. What Connor shared next turned my understanding of the situation upside down. Robert wasn't just living a double life between Eleanor and me. There was more to the story. Much. More. And it was about to completely transform everything I thought I knew about my 50-year marriage. Connor's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. Mrs. Wilson, Robert doesn't just have 2 lives. He has 3. My knees weakened, and I sank onto the hallway bench, clutching the phone tighter. What do you mean, 3? Eleanor isn't the only other woman, Connor explained. There's someone else in Boston, Catherine Winters. She runs an investment firm there. I only know because I work in finance and saw Robert at a conference last year. He introduced himself using a different name, Robert Morgan, and was with Catherine. I thought he looked familiar from family gatherings with Aunt Eleanor, but couldn't place him until I saw a photo on my aunt's mantle a month later. The room seemed to spin around me. Not just Philadelphia, but Boston, too. How many versions of my husband existed? "Does your aunt know about this Catherine woman?" I managed to ask. "No," Connor replied. "I didn't tell her. I thought maybe I was mistaken, or there was some explanation." Robert saw me recognizing him that day and pulled me aside, claimed he was working undercover on financial fraud and needed my discretion. It sounded plausible enough in the moment. He can be very convincing. But after hearing what's happening now— "Thank you for telling me," I said mechanically, my mind racing to process this additional betrayal. After hanging up, I sat, motionless in our foyer, a space I'd decorated decades ago with a carefully chosen bench and mirror, family photos arranged on the wall above. In every image, Robert stood smiling, his arm around me or Jennifer, the picture of devoted husband and father. Had any of it been real? The next morning, I drove to the bank again, this time to access our safe deposit box. Inside were our wills, property deeds, insurance policies, and Robert's grandfather's pocket watch that he claimed to wear only on special occasions. I photographed everything with shaking hands, then added the documents to a folder I'd begun compiling. On my way home, my phone rang. Jennifer. "Mom, I spoke with Dad," she said, her voice unsteady. "He says there's been a misunderstanding. He's been helping Eleanor financially because she's the widow of his college roommate. He says you've blown things out of proportion." The ease with which Robert had crafted this lie didn't surprise me anymore. Did he explain the beach ceremony? Photos? The holidays he spent with her family? The separate phone line and bank accounts? I asked quietly. Jennifer hesitated. He said it was complicated, that Eleanor was unstable after her husband died and he felt responsible. "Mom, I don't know what to believe." "I understand," I said, fighting to keep disappointment from my voice. "But Jennifer, ask yourself why your father never mentioned this college roommate or his widow before. Ask yourself why he'd need a separate phone line and bank account for charity." "He's coming over for dinner tonight with Daniel and me," she said. "He wants to explain everything properly." After we hung up, I sat in my parked car, staring at our family home. The flower boxes I'd planted in spring were in full bloom, impatiens in Robert's favorite shade of red. For 50 years, I'd chosen flowers based on his preferences, cooked meals to his taste, arranged our social calendar around his comfort. I'd believed that's what marriage was, a constant accommodating of the other person's needs and desires. But Robert hadn't been accommodating my needs. He'd been living multiple lives, giving pieces of himself to different women while I believed I had his whole heart. That evening, as twilight settled over our neighborhood, Robert returned home. I was sitting in the garden, a glass of wine in hand, staring at the rose bushes I'd tended for decades. "Maggie," he said cautiously, hovering at the garden's edge. "I've spoken with Jennifer. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding." I took a slow sip of wine. "Which misunderstanding are you referring to? Eleanor in Philadelphia? Or Catherine in Boston?" The color drained from his face. For the first time in our marriage, I saw Robert truly speechless. "Connor called me," I explained. "Eleanor's nephew. He saw you with Catherine Winters last year. Called herself your wife too, didn't she?" Robert's shoulders sagged. He suddenly looked every one of his 72 years. "It's not," he began, then stopped himself. "It's complicated." "That seems to be your favorite phrase lately," I observed. "But actually, it's quite simple. You've been living multiple lives with multiple women. The only complicated part is how you kept it hidden for so long." He moved to sit beside me, but I raised my hand, stopping him. "Don't. I don't want you near me right now." Robert remained standing, shifting uncomfortably. What are you going to do? The question hung in the air between us, the first honest thing he'd said in days. Not denials, not explanations, but acknowledgement that I now held power in this situation. I'm going to Florence, I said simply. I'm going to take that semester abroad that I gave up for you 50 years ago. He blinked, confused. Florence? Maggie, we need to work this out. The house, our accounts. We'll all still be here when I return, I finished for him. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the divorce proceedings. Until then, I suggest you figure out which of your lives you want to continue with, because this one, with me, is over. He took a step toward me, his expression hardening. You can't just leave. What about Jennifer? What about our reputation? In the community? I laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised us both. Our reputation? Robert, you've maintained 3 separate lives for decades. I'd say concern for reputation is a bit late now. I've given you everything, he said, his voice rising. This house, your comfortable life, security. And I gave you 50 years, I interrupted. I gave up my dreams, my career, my sense of self. I'm 70 years old, Robert. How much more do you think you're entitled to take from me? He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps he was. The Maggie he knew, the accommodating, uncomplaining wife, was disappearing with every word I spoke. Where will you go? He asked finally, his voice smaller. I told you, Florence. After that, I don't know. I stood up, brushing invisible dirt from my slacks. I've booked a flight for next week. You can stay here until then, but in the guest room. As I walked past him toward the house, he caught my arm. The money, he said urgently. Maggie, you don't understand. It's not as simple as dividing everything. There are complications. I gently removed his hand. I'm sure there are. That's for the lawyers to sort out. Inside, I climbed the stairs to our bedroom and began methodically sorting through my belongings, deciding what would accompany me to Florence and what could remain behind. 50 years in this house had accumulated so many possessions. Yet, as I evaluated each item, I realized how few actually mattered to me. My mother's recipes, a small watercolor Jennifer had painted in high school, the first edition Austen novels I'd collected over the years, my teaching credentials, the jade earrings my father had given me before he died, and my passport, the symbol of the road not taken, now my ticket to a new beginning. The next day, I met with Marcus again, bringing the additional information about Catherine in Boston. This changes things, he said, reviewing my notes. Multiple households, potentially multiple fraudulent identities. This goes beyond typical marital asset concealment. What does that mean for me? I asked. It means we have grounds to conduct a comprehensive forensic accounting of all his finances. It also means criminal charges could potentially be on the table. Fraud, tax evasion. Marcus looked up from his notes. Are you prepared for this to potentially become a criminal matter? The question gave me pause. Despite everything, did I want to see Robert in legal jeopardy? The man who'd held my hand through my parents' funerals, who'd paced hospital hallways when Jennifer broke her arm at 12, who'd taught Tyler to ride a bike. Let's focus on the divorce for now, I decided. I want what's rightfully mine, no more, no less. Marcus nodded. Fair enough. Now, about this trip to Florence. He explained the legal implications of leaving the country during divorce proceedings, helped me draft a formal separation agreement, and advised me on financial matters. By the time I left his office, I felt fortified with knowledge and a clear path forward. That evening, Jennifer came by the house. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her expression strained. Mom, she began, standing awkwardly in the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. Dad's told me everything. I continued chopping, vegetables not looking up. Has he? All of it? Including Catherine in Boston? Jennifer's sharp intake of breath answered my question. There's someone in Boston, too? I set down my knife and turned to face my daughter. Sit down, Jenny. She sank into a kitchen chair, looking suddenly young and vulnerable. I sat across from her and took her hands in mine. Your father has constructed elaborate lives with at least 3 women in 3 different cities. I've spoken with Eleanor in Philadelphia. Connor, Eleanor's nephew, has confirmed Catherine in Boston. There may be more we don't know about. But why? Jennifer whispered. Why would he do this? I don't know, I admitted. Power? Ego? Some need I couldn't fulfill? It doesn't really matter now. He told me about Eleanor, Jennifer said slowly. Said it was a mistake, that he got in too deep helping her after her husband died and didn't know how to extricate himself. He said he always loved you, that he was going to end things with her. I smiled sadly. And you believed him because he's your father and because he's always been good at telling people exactly what they need to hear. Tears welled in Jennifer's eyes. I don't know what to think anymore. You don't have to choose sides, I told her gently. He's still your father. Nothing changes that. But I need to do what's right for me now, and that means leaving. Leaving? Her eyes widened. Leaving where? Florence, just for a while. I need space to think, to figure out who I am outside of this marriage. Jennifer stared at me, confusion evident on her face. Florence, Italy? Mom, you've never traveled alone. You don't speak Italian. You're 70 years old. Yes, to all of that, I agreed. And yet, here I am, booking tickets and finding an apartment to rent. But why Florence specifically? I told her then about the semester abroad I'd given, up to marry Robert, about my teaching opportunity lost, about the dreams deferred in service to our family. I never knew that, she said quietly. You never talked about wanting to teach overseas. It didn't seem important once I'd chosen another path. But now I have the chance to see what might have been, to experience a small piece of that other life. Jennifer stayed for dinner. We talked more openly than we had in years, about her marriage to Daniel, about Tyler's struggles in school, about her own abandoned dreams of becoming an artist instead of following her father into finance. I never told you because I didn't want to disappoint Dad, she confessed. He was so proud when I got my business degree. And now? I asked. She shrugged. I'm good at what I do, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd had the courage to choose differently. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet house, thinking about choices, the ones we make consciously and the ones made for us by circumstance or expectation. I'd chosen Robert, chosen family, chosen stability. I didn't regret those choices, not entirely, but I regretted losing myself so completely in them that I'd forgotten I could choose differently. The week passed in a blur of preparations. Robert stayed mostly away, presumably managing the crisis with his other families. When we did cross paths in the house, our interactions were strained and minimal. 3 days before my scheduled departure, Robert cornered me in his study where I was gathering financial documents. Maggie, you need to reconsider this trip, he said, his voice tense. There are financial matters you don't understand. Then explain them to me, I replied evenly. He hesitated, then shook his head. It's complicated. Investment structures, tax considerations. Trust me when I say it's better if we handle this together, the way we always have. The way we always have, I repeated slowly. You making decisions, and me trusting you blindly. That approach has worked out rather poorly for me, wouldn't you say? His jaw tightened. I've always provided for you. For 50 years, you've never wanted for anything. Except honesty, I countered. Except fidelity. Except the respect of being treated as a partner rather than a convenience. Robert's composure slipped. You have no idea what you're doing. If you leave now, if you push this divorce through, without understanding the financial implications. Are you threatening me, Robert? He ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. Not threatening, warning. There are investments, arrangements that need to be managed carefully. If you disrupt them now, then what? I pressed. He didn't answer, but his expression spoke volumes. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in my husband's eyes. That night, I called Sofia Ramirez, my closest friend from my teaching days. After hearing a condensed version of my situation, she didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over," she declared. "Pack your bags tonight. You're staying with me until your flight." "That's not necessary," I protested. "Maggie," she said firmly, "your husband has been living a triple life and is now warning you about mysterious financial arrangements. You're not staying in that house another night." I looked around our bedroom, the space I'd shared with Robert for decades, the curtains I'd sewn myself, the wedding portrait on the wall, and realized Sofia was right. This was no longer a safe harbor for me. 2 hours later, I was settled in Sofia's guest room across town, my essentials packed in 2 suitcases, my important documents secured in a folder, my passport tucked safely in my purse. "I still can't believe it," Sofia said, pouring us each a glass of brandy. "Robert always seemed so devoted to you." "He was an excellent actor," I replied, sipping the warming liquid. Or perhaps he compartmentalized so effectively that he believed his own lies. "What did Marcus say about these financial warnings?" "To document everything, forward any communications from Robert directly to him, and not to sign anything." Sofia nodded approvingly. "Smart. Now, about Florence. Do you have somewhere to stay?" I showed her the apartment I'd rented online, a small but sunny place near the Arno River, walking distance to the historic center. "It's perfect," she said, squeezing my hand. "And what will you do there?" "Breathe," I answered simply. "Walk. Look at art. Learn some Italian. Figure out who Maggie Wilson is when she's not Robert's wife." The following morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Jennifer had called 3 times, and there were numerous text messages from friends and acquaintances in town. Confused, I opened the local news website to find Robert's face staring back at me from the screen. "Prominent banker Robert Wilson. Under investigation for financial irregularities," the headline blared. I read the article with mounting horror. The FBI had raided Robert's office at Wilson Financial the previous evening. They were investigating allegations of a Ponzi scheme that had potentially defrauded investors of millions. Robert had been taken in for questioning but released pending further investigation. My phone rang again. Jennifer. "Mom," she cried when I answered. "Have you seen the news? Dad's being investigated for fraud. They're saying he's been running some kind of investment scam for years." "I'm seeing it now," I said, struggling to process this new development. "Are you okay?" "No, nothing is okay. Dad says it's all a misunderstanding, that he can explain everything, but the FBI took his computers, his files. They even came to our house looking for documents." "Your house?" I repeated, alarmed. "Why would they search your house?" "They had a warrant. Said Dad had listed our address as his business office on some documents." Her voice broke. "Mom, what's happening? First the other women, now this?" I closed my eyes, pieces falling into place. The separate bank accounts, the mysterious investment structures. The urgency in Robert's voice when he warned me not to disrupt the financial arrangements. "Jenny, listen to me carefully," I said. "Don't sign anything. Don't move any money. Call Marcus Chen immediately and ask him to recommend a criminal defense attorney, just as a precaution." "A criminal defense attorney?" she echoed, panic rising in her voice. "Mom, do you think Dad actually did something illegal?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I think we need to be prepared for that. Possibility. After calming Jennifer as best I could, I called Marcus, who had already seen the news. "This complicates things," he said grimly. "If Robert's finances are tied up in legal proceedings, it could delay the divorce settlement significantly." "Should I postpone my trip?" I asked. "Actually, no," Marcus replied after a moment's consideration. "As long as you're available by phone or video call if needed, some distance might be beneficial right now. The investigation is in its early stages, and this could get very messy very quickly." Next, I called the Riverside Police Department, speaking with Detective Sarah Mercer, who confirmed that while Robert wasn't under arrest, he was a person of interest in an ongoing investigation. "Mrs. Wilson," she said carefully, "we may need to speak with you as well. As his spouse, you might have information relevant to our inquiry." "Of course," I agreed. "I can come to the station today." "That would be helpful," Detective Mercer replied. "And Mrs. Wilson, I understand this must be a shock for you. Please bring any financial documents you have access to." The interview at the police station lasted 3 hours. I answered questions about Robert's work habits, his travel schedule, any unusual financial behaviors I might have observed. I provided the documentation I'd gathered for the divorce proceedings, including records of the separate accounts and transfers to Philadelphia and Boston. "Were you aware that your husband maintained residences in those cities?" Detective Mercer asked. "I only discovered that recently," I explained. "I believed he was traveling for work." She made a note in her file. "And these women, Eleanor, Moran and Catherine Winters, did they know about each other or about you?" "Eleanor knew about me eventually, though Robert told her our marriage was in name only. I don't know what Catherine knew." "Mrs. Wilson," Detective Mercer said gently, "based on our preliminary investigation, it appears your husband may have been using his relationships with these women to facilitate his financial scheme. He established credibility in different cities, using different identities, built networks of wealthy clients through their social connections, and moved money between accounts to create the appearance of investment returns." My stomach churned. "Are you saying he was using us, all of us, as part of a fraud?" "That's our working theory," she confirmed. "We'll need to conduct further interviews, of course. Would you be willing to connect us with Eleanor Moran?" I provided Connor's contact information instead, explaining that Eleanor was likely still processing her own shock at the revelations. By the time I left the police station, night had fallen. Sophia was waiting outside to drive me back to her house. I collapsed into her car, emotionally drained. "They think Robert was running a Ponzi scheme," I told her as she navigated through town, using his multiple identities and relationships to build networks of investors in different cities. Sophia shook her head in disbelief. "And you never suspected anything?" "How could I? I trusted him completely with our finances. He was a banker. It was his profession, his family business. Questioning his financial decisions would have been like someone questioning my teaching methods." When we reached Sophia's house, I found more missed calls from Jennifer and, surprisingly, one from Connor. I called Connor first. "Mrs. Wilson?" he said when he answered, his voice tight with stress. "I've been contacted by the FBI. They're saying Uncle Robert, Mr. Wilson, was running some kind of investment fraud." "I just finished speaking with the police," I confirmed. "They seem to think he was using his relationships with your aunt and Catherine Winters to build investor networks." "That makes sense," Connor said slowly. He became very integrated in Aunt Eleanor's social circle. Arts patrons, gallery donors, people with money to invest. And Catherine's firm in Boston manages wealth for high-net-worth individuals. "Connor," I asked hesitantly, "did you ever invest with Robert?" His silence answered before his words did. "Yes," he finally admitted. "And I recommended him to friends, colleagues. He promised exceptional returns, and for years, he delivered. The statements always looked legitimate." I closed my eyes, imagining the ripple effects of Robert's deception spreading outward, touching lives I'd never even knew existed. "I'm sorry," I said, though the apology felt woefully inadequate. "It's not your fault," Connor replied. "You were deceived too." After ending the call with Connor, I spoke briefly with Jennifer, assuring her that I was safe at Sophia's and would see her before my flight. That night, I lay awake in Sophia's guest room, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The man I'd married, the man I'd built a life with for 50 years, was a stranger to me. Not just unfaithful, but potentially criminal. Had anything been real? Our courtship? The early years of marriage? His love for Jennifer? I thought back to small moments over the decades. Robert's insistence on handling all financial matters, his irritation when I asked questions about investments, the separate office in our home that he kept meticulously locked. Had there been signs I missed, or had I been too willing to accept the traditional division of responsibilities in our marriage? My flight to Florence was scheduled for the day after tomorrow. With the investigation unfolding, part of me felt I should stay, to support Jennifer, to cooperate with authorities, to face whatever came next alongside my family. But another part, growing stronger by the hour, recognized that leaving was the right choice. Not running away from problems, but running toward myself, toward the woman I might have been and could still become. The next morning brought more developments. Robert had been formally arrested overnight, charged with wire, fraud, money laundering, and operating a Ponzi scheme that had allegedly defrauded investors of over $30 million. His face was on every news channel, the distinguished banker now in handcuffs, being led into the federal courthouse. Jennifer called, nearly hysterical. "They're saying Dad could go to prison for 20 years. 20 years, Mom. He'll be in his 90s if he ever gets out." "Breathe, Jenny," I coached her, fighting to keep my own voice steady. "This is just the beginning of the legal process. We don't know how it will play out." "He wants to see you," she said. "He's been calling me, begging me to convince you to visit him before you leave." I hesitated. Did I owe Robert that final conversation? After 50 years of marriage, despite his betrayals, did I need that closure before beginning my new chapter? "I'll think about it," I told Jennifer. After we hung up, I sat in Sophia's sunroom, staring out at her garden. The flowers were different varieties than what I grew at home. Wildflowers instead of my carefully cultivated roses and impatiens. There was beauty in their untamed growth, their natural patterns, so unlike the controlled environment I'd maintained for decades. In that moment of quiet reflection, surrounded by Sophia's chaotic but vibrant garden, I made my decision. I would see Robert one last time before leaving for Florence. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to close this chapter on my own terms. The county detention center was cold and sterile. I followed a guard through security checks and metal detectors until we reached a visiting room divided by glass partitions. Robert was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. Even after just one night in custody, he looked diminished, his confident posture replaced by a defensive hunch. We each picked up a phone receiver. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Maggie," he finally said, his voice crackling through the line, "thank you for coming." "You look terrible," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Robert's laugh was hollow. "Prison will do that to you." "It's been one night, Robert." He rubbed his face, the stubble on his cheeks catching the harsh fluorescent light. "Why did you come?" "I needed to see you, to understand." I studied him through the glass partition, searching for the man I'd married, the father of my child, the companion of 50 years. Was any of it real? Robert's eyes met mine, then darted away. "Of course it was real. You and Jennifer, you're my family." "And Eleanor? And Catherine?" I pressed. "Were they your family too?" He sighed deeply. It's not what you think. Maggie. It started as business connections, networking opportunities. Eleanor's late husband had investor contacts in the art world. Catherine's firm managed portfolios I needed access to. But yes, over time it became more. And the financial fraud? I kept my voice steady. Was that real too? Robert's face hardened. Those are allegations. Nothing's been proven. Don't. I cut him off. Don't lie to me anymore. The FBI has evidence. Detective Mercer showed me documents with your signature, multiple signatures, under different variations of your name. His shoulders slumped. It wasn't supposed to end like this. The market turned. Investments didn't perform as expected. I borrowed from new investors to cover obligations to earlier ones, just temporarily, until things improved. But then I needed more investors and more. The classic Ponzi scheme described so matter-of-factly it was almost chilling. And the relationships with these women? They were just collateral damage? I asked. Robert flinched. That's not fair. I cared. For them, I cared for you. You can't care for someone while systematically lying to them for decades, Robert. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Maggie, listen to me. There's money. Accounts the authorities don't know about yet. Offshore holdings. If you access them before they're frozen, we could still salvage something. For you, for Jennifer, for Tyler's college fund. I stared at him in disbelief. You want me to help you hide assets? Commit fraud myself? I want to protect our family, he insisted. Everything I did was for us, to maintain our lifestyle, to secure our future. No, I said firmly. Everything you did was for yourself, to feel powerful, to live out some twisted fantasy of being multiple men with multiple lives. Robert's expression darkened. You have no idea what pressures I've been under. My father's legacy, the expectations of running Wilson Financial, maintaining our position in the community. You've lived a sheltered life, Maggie. You've never had to make the hard choices. His attempt to shift blame ignited something in me. A white-hot anger that had been building since the first phone bill discovery. A sheltered life? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. I gave up my education, my career aspirations, my identity to support yours. I raised our daughter largely alone while you were traveling for business, or should I say visiting your other families. I've spent 50 years making our house a home, maintaining your social connections, being the perfect banker's wife. Don't you dare tell me I've been sheltered from hard choices. For the first time, Robert seemed genuinely taken aback by my response. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. I'm going to Florence tomorrow, I said. When I return, I'll cooperate fully with the investigation, but I will not help you hide money, and I will not excuse what you've done. Maggie, please, he began, but I cut him off. I did love you, Robert. For 50 years, I loved the man I thought you were. That's the tragedy in all this. Not just your betrayal, but the waste of that love. I hung up the receiver and stood, signaling to the guard that I was finished. As I walked away, I didn't look back at Robert. I'd said what I needed to say. The last thread connecting us had been severed. Outside the detention center, the late spring air felt cleansing after the recycled chill inside. Sophia was waiting in her car, reading a novel. She looked up as I approached. How did it go? She asked as I buckled myself into the passenger seat. Exactly as expected, I replied. He's sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he did. Sophia squeezed my hand briefly before starting the car. What now? Now we pick up Jennifer and go to lunch, I said. Then I finish packing for Florence. Jennifer was waiting at Riverside Cafe, our usual spot for mother-daughter conversations over the years. Her face was drawn, her normally perfect appearance somewhat disheveled. When she saw me, she stood and embraced me tightly. Mom, she whispered, I don't know how to process any of this. Neither do I admitted. But we're going to figure it out together. Over salads? Neither of us had much appetite for. Jennifer updated me on her conversations with the authorities. They've interviewed me twice already, she said. Asked about Dad's working habits, his travel schedule, whether I ever met Eleanor or Catherine. And had you? I asked gently. Met either of them? Jennifer fiddled with her wedding ring. I met Eleanor once, years ago. Dad introduced her as an old family friend who was in town for an art exhibition. I had no reason to suspect anything more. She looked up, her eyes pleading. You have to believe me, Mom. I do, I assured her. Your father was very skilled at compartmentalizing his life. We all believed what he wanted us to believe. They're saying some of Dad's clients could lose everything, Jennifer continued, her voice breaking. Retirement savings, college funds, medical expense accounts, all gone. How could he do that to people? I had no answer. The Robert I thought I knew would never have deliberately harmed others. But then, the Robert I thought I knew wouldn't have maintained multiple secret families either. The FBI interviewed Daniel. Yesterday, Jennifer added. Apparently, Dad listed him as a financial consultant on some documents, though Daniel swears he never did any work for Wilson Financial. Alarm shot through me. Is Daniel under investigation too? They say he's just a witness for now, Jennifer said, but her worried expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Another ripple effect of Robert's deception, potentially engulfing our son-in-law in legal trouble. How far would the damage spread? And Tyler? I asked, thinking of my teenage grandson. How is he handling everything? Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. He's angry, confused. The other kids at school are talking about Grandpa being arrested. Someone spray-painted thief on our garage door last night. I reached across the table to take her hand. I'm so sorry, Jenny. I wish I could fix this for you, for Tyler. It's not your fault, she said, squeezing my fingers. But Mom, do you really have to leave tomorrow? With everything happening? I do, I said firmly. I need space to think, to breathe. And you need to focus on Tyler, on protecting your family from the fallout of your father's actions. I'll be available by phone and email. Marcus has all the information for reaching me in Florence. Jennifer nodded reluctantly. I understand. I just hate the thought of you being alone through all this. I've been effectively alone for years, I replied. I just didn't know it. Maybe being physically alone will actually feel more honest. After lunch, Jennifer drove me back to Sophia's to finish packing. As we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me with a determined expression. Mom, I want you to have this, she said, reaching into her purse and pulling out an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. Jenny, I can't accept this, I protested. You need to conserve your resources. We don't know how the investigation will impact your finances. It's not from our regular accounts, she explained. When Tyler was born, I opened a separate savings account in my name only. I've been putting money aside every month, my own private safety net. After seeing what's happening with Dad, I'm glad I did. The parallels to my own secret account were striking. Like mother, like daughter, both of us instinctively creating financial safeguards in our marriages. This money is completely clean, Jennifer continued. No connection to Dad or Wilson Financial. Please take it. Use it to extend your stay in Florence if you want, or to travel elsewhere. Just make up for some of the opportunities you missed because of us. Tears welled in my eyes. Because of us? Jenny, you were the greatest opportunity of my life. I've never regretted being your mother, not for a single moment. But you regretted giving up your dreams, she said softly. The teaching position. Abroad, the travels you never took. I made choices, I corrected her. Some with more information than others. but they were still my choices. In the end, I accepted the check, recognizing it for what it was. Not just financial support, but Jennifer's way of giving me permission to prioritize myself for once. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of final preparations. I spoke with Marcus one last time, confirming arrangements for my legal representation during my absence. Sophia helped me organize my medications and make copies of my travel documents. By evening, my 2 suitcases stood ready by the door, my carry-on packed with essentials for the long flight. That night, I found myself unable to sleep, my mind cycling through the events of the past weeks. The phone bill discovery, the confrontation with Robert, the devastating revelations about his multiple lives and financial crimes. It felt like a lifetime of experiences compressed into days. I got up around 3 a.m. and went to Sophia's kitchen to make tea. To my surprise, she was already there, reading at the table. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, setting down her book. "Too much on my mind," I admitted. "What's your excuse?" "Old age," she replied with a wry smile. "Sleep and I have been casual acquaintances for years." She poured me tea from the pot she'd already prepared. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the occasional turning of a page or sip of tea. "I keep thinking about choices," I said finally. "All the moments that led me here. Marrying Robert, giving up Florence, building our life in Riverside. Were they all wrong? Was I wrong all along?" Sophia considered this thoughtfully. "I don't think choices are right or wrong in the moment we make them. They're just choices, based on what we know and feel at the time. But if I'd chosen differently, if I'd gone to Florence 50 years ago instead of marrying Robert—" "You wouldn't have Jennifer," Sophia pointed out gently. "You wouldn't have Tyler. You wouldn't have had the teaching career that influenced so many students. Different choices would have led to a different life, not necessarily a better one." Her words resonated with something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. My life hadn't been a mistake. It had simply been the life that resulted from the choices I'd made with the information I had at the time. "What matters now," Sophia continued, "is what you choose going forward with the information you have today." I nodded, finding comfort in the simplicity of that truth. "I choose Florence," I said. "I choose to see what else life might hold for me beyond being Robert Wilson's wife." At dawn, Jennifer arrived to drive us to the airport. She'd brought Tyler, who insisted on coming despite the early hour. "Grandma," he said, hugging me tightly on the sidewalk outside departures. "I made you this." He handed me a carefully folded paper crane. "It's for good luck on your journey. My friend Kenji taught me how to make them." I tucked the delicate creation carefully into my purse. "I'll keep it with me always," I promised him. "And I found this online," he continued, showing me a translation app on his phone. "You can download it and it'll help you with Italian. It even works offline." His thoughtfulness brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Tyler. That's incredibly helpful." "Just come back, okay?" he said, suddenly looking younger than his 16 years. "Everything's changing so fast and I don't want to lose you too." "You won't lose me," I assured him. "I'm just finding a different version of me. I'll be back before you know it." The goodbyes were emotional, but not devastating. Both Jennifer and Tyler seemed to understand that this journey was necessary for me, even if the timing was complicated by Robert's arrest and the ongoing investigation. "Call us when you land," Jennifer reminded me as I headed toward security. "And every day after that." "I will," I promised. "Take care of each other." The flight to Florence was long, nearly 10 hours with a connection in Paris. I spent the time alternating between reading the Italian phrasebook I'd purchased, napping and staring out the window at the clouds below, marveling at how quickly geographic distance could be traversed when emotional distance often took years to navigate. When we finally began our descent into Florence, My heart raced with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. The landscape below was nothing like Connecticut. Terracotta rooftops, cypress trees, the snaking path of the Arno River cutting through the historic city center. As the wheels touched down, I realized I was smiling, a genuine smile that felt foreign on my face after weeks of tension. The Florence airport was smaller than I'd expected, easy to navigate even with my limited Italian. I collected my luggage and found a taxi, handing the driver the address of my rented apartment on a slip of paper. "Americana?" he asked as we pulled away from the curb. "Si," I replied, using one of the few Italian words I knew with confidence. "Vacanza?" he continued. I hesitated. Was this a vacation? A self-imposed exile? A rebirth? None of those labels seemed quite right. "Nuovo inizio," I finally said, reading from my phrasebook. "A new beginning." The driver nodded approvingly in the rearview mirror. "Nuovo inizio. Bene." The taxi wound through narrow streets crowded with scooters and pedestrians, past ancient buildings and modern shops side by side. Eventually, we turned onto a quieter street near the Arno and stopped in front of a pale yellow building with shuttered windows and a small balcony overflowing with geraniums. Gabriella, my landlady, was waiting outside as arranged. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her mid-50s, with stylish silver-streaked dark hair and a welcoming smile. "Signora Wilson?" she called as I climbed out of the taxi. "Benvenuta a Firenze." She helped me with my luggage and led me up 3 flights of stairs to a small but charming apartment. The main room had high ceilings, tall windows overlooking the street, and simple, elegant furnishings. A tiny kitchen occupied one corner, a breakfast table another. Through an archway was a bedroom with a wrought iron bed covered in crisp white linens. "È perfetto," I said, using another phrase I'd memorized on the plane. Gabriella beamed. "I am happy you like. You stay how long?" "1 month, maybe more," I replied. "I'm not sure yet." She nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable. "Firenze is good place for thinking," she said sagely. "Many people come for finding themselves." After explaining the basics, how the stove worked, where to find extra blankets, which day to put out the recycling, Gabriella handed me the keys. "Now is your home," she said simply, then left me to settle in. I stood in the center of the apartment, keys in hand, overwhelmed by a sudden sense of possibility. For the first time in 50 years, I was in a space that was entirely mine, in a city where no one knew me as Robert's wife or Jennifer's mother or a pillar of Riverside society. Here, I was just Maggie, a woman in her 70s starting a new chapter. The reality of my situation hit me then, the enormity of what had happened and what might still be to come. I sank onto the sofa, exhaustion finally catching up to me. The emotional whirlwind of Robert's betrayal, the shock of his arrest, the uncertainty of the legal proceedings ahead, it all crashed over me like a wave. I allowed myself 10 minutes to feel it all. The grief, the anger, the fear, the exhilaration. Then I got up, unpacked my suitcases, and made the bed with Gabriella's linens. I found the closest market and bought essentials: coffee, bread, cheese, fruit. I figured out how to connect to the apartment's Wi-Fi and sent messages to Jennifer, Tyler, and Sophia, letting them know I'd arrived safely. That evening, I sat on the small balcony with a glass of local wine, watching the sun set behind the buildings across the street. The sounds of Florence floated up from below, snippets of conversation in Italian, a scooter engine, music from a nearby restaurant. None of it was familiar, and that unfamiliarity felt strangely comforting. For dinner, I ventured to a small trattoria on the corner. The waiter didn't speak much English, and my Italian was practically non-existent, but we managed through gestures and smiles. He brought me a perfect plate of pasta, simple and delicious, and refilled my glass of wine without being asked. When the check came, I paid with euros from the currency exchange at the airport, calculating the tip carefully. Such A small thing, paying a restaurant bill, but it struck me as significant. In 50 years of marriage, Robert had always handed over the credit card, always calculated the tip, always signed the receipt. Tonight, I had done it myself, in a country where I didn't speak the language, and it had gone perfectly fine. Back. At the apartment, I prepared for bed, setting out clothes for the next day and organizing my medications in the bathroom cabinet. As I moved around the space, I found myself thinking about how differently I would have experienced Florence as a young teacher in my 20s, versus now as a woman in her 70s with a lifetime of experiences, both beautiful and painful, behind me. Would I have appreciated the simple pleasure of a well-prepared pasta dish then as much as I did tonight? Would I have noticed the particular quality of light on the ancient buildings, or would I have been too busy rushing from one tourist attraction to the next? Would I have felt this profound sense of independence, or would I have taken it for granted? These were unanswerable questions, of course. That young Maggie, the one who might have come to Florence 50 years ago, was a road not traveled, a self unlived, but perhaps there were parts of her still within me, waiting to be rediscovered. With that thought, I climbed into bed and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, the first truly restful night I'd had since finding that fateful phone bill in the attic. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the shutters and the sounds of Florence coming to life below. For a disorienting moment, I expected to see my bedroom in Riverside, to hear Robert in the bathroom or downstairs making coffee. Then reality returned. I was alone in Florence, and Robert was in a detention center in Connecticut awaiting trial. Rather than feeling sad or anxious, I felt oddly liberated. Today was entirely mine to shape however I wished. No responsibilities. To anyone else, no expectations to meet, no role to play. After a simple breakfast of bread, cheese, and coffee on the balcony, I decided to orient myself in the city. Armed with a map from Gabriella and my phone with its translation app, I set out to explore my neighborhood. The streets were busy with locals going about their morning routines, opening shops, delivering goods, walking to work. I found a small piazza with a fountain where older men were playing chess and women chatted on benches. A market was setting up nearby, vendors arranging produce, flowers, and handcrafted items on tables. I wandered without a specific destination, allowing myself to get slightly lost before finding my way again. Every corner revealed something new: a tiny chapel with frescoed walls, a workshop where a craftsman restored antique furniture, a bookstore with volumes stacked from floor to ceiling. Around noon, I found myself approaching the Ponte Vecchio, the famous bridge lined with jewelry shops spanning the Arno River. Tourists crowded the narrow walkway, taking photos and browsing the store's glittering displays. As I crossed the, bridge, I noticed a small art school tucked in a side street nearby. A sign in the window advertised, Arte per tutti, art for everyone, with a schedule of classes in both Italian and English. On impulse, I went inside. The reception area was small but welcoming, with student artwork displayed on the walls and a friendly young woman behind the desk. "Can I help you?" she asked in accented English. "I'm interested in your classes," I replied. "I'm visiting Florence for a while and thought I might try something new." She handed me a brochure with course descriptions. "We have many visitors who take classes with us, some for one day, some for weeks. All levels welcome." I scanned the offerings: drawing, watercolor, oil painting, sculpture. Nothing I'd ever considered trying before. Robert had always been dismissive of my occasional interest in art, suggesting I focus on more practical hobbies like gardening or cooking. "The watercolor class for beginners starts tomorrow," the receptionist noted. 3 hours, all materials included. "I'll take it," I decided instantly. She seemed mildly surprised by my quick decision, but processed my registration efficiently. "Wonderful. Class begins at 10 a.m. Wear clothes that can get a little messy." I left with a receipt and a small flutter of excitement in my chest. Margaret Wilson, was going to take a watercolor class in Florence. It was such a small act of independence, yet it felt monumental. On my way back to the apartment, my phone rang. Jennifer calling via video chat as promised. "Mom," she exclaimed when I answered. "How's Florence? Show me everything." I turned the camera to capture the street around me, the view of the river, the historic buildings lining the embankment. "It's beautiful," I told her. "And I've signed. Up for a watercolor class tomorrow." "Watercolor? I didn't know you were interested in painting." "Neither did I admitted. "But I thought, why not try?" Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. "Things are intensifying here. The FBI is interviewing more of Dad's clients. They've found evidence of fraud going back at least 15 years. My stomach tightened. "Have they contacted you again?" "Not yet, but Daniel's been interviewed twice more. They're looking into all the accounts Dad set up in Daniel's name without his knowledge." She sighed heavily. "I hate that you're missing this, but I'm also glad you're away from the circus it's becoming. The press is camped outside our house." "Oh, Jenny, I'm so sorry." "It's okay. Tyler and I are staying with Daniel's parents for now. It's quieter." "There." She managed a small smile. "Enough about the mess here. Tell me more about Florence." We chatted for a few more minutes, with me sharing details of my apartment and neighborhood, and Jennifer filling me in on Tyler's latest baseball game. Neither of us mentioned Robert directly again, though his presence, or rather, the hole, created by his absence, loomed over our conversation. After we said goodbye, I continued my walk, processing the news from home. 15 years of fraud, that timeline corresponded roughly with when Robert's business trips had become more frequent, when he'd become more secretive about finances, when he'd insisted on separate accounts for investment purposes. Had I suspected something on some level? Had there been signs I'd chosen to ignore? The questions nagged at me as I navigated the busy streets back to my apartment. When I reached my building, Gabriella was outside watering the geraniums on the main entrance balcony. "Ah, Signora Wilson," she called down. "How was your first morning in Firenze?" "Lovely," I replied. I walked to the Ponte Vecchio and signed up for an art class. She beamed approvingly. "Perfetto. You must come for coffee tomorrow. My apartment, ground floor. We talk about good places not for tourists." Her spontaneous invitation warmed me. I'd like that very much. Inside my apartment, I made a simple lunch and ate it on the balcony, watching the street life below. Afterward, I decided to research something that had been on my mind since arriving: volunteer opportunities for English speakers in Florence. Online, I found several organizations that welcomed English-speaking volunteers: a children's library, a community center for immigrants, and an after-school program for students learning English. The latter caught my attention immediately, rekindling my old passion for teaching. I sent an email expressing interest and received a response within hours, inviting me to visit the program the following week. They were always looking for native English speakers, they explained, especially those with teaching experience. The prospect of using my skills again, of being valued for my professional abilities rather than my role as someone's wife, mother, or grandmother, filled me with a quiet excitement. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed teaching until that moment. As evening approached, I received another call, this time from Marcus Chen. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted me. "How's Florence treating you?" "Better than expected," I replied. "What? News from Connecticut?" Marcus's tone grew serious. "The investigation is expanding. They've uncovered accounts in the Caymans, evidence of identity fraud, tax evasion going back decades. I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be a very public, very messy legal battle. And my position in all this? For now, you're considered a witness, not an accomplice. Your cooperation with investigators has helped establish that you were unaware of Robert's activities." He paused. "There is another matter, though. Robert's attorney has reached out about the house. What about it? They're proposing that you surrender any claim to the property in exchange for certain concessions in the divorce settlement. I laughed without humor. What concessions could Robert possibly offer? From what I understand, most of his assets are subject to seizure. That's what I told them, Marcus confirmed. Nevertheless, they're pushing for a resolution on the house before it potentially becomes part of asset forfeiture proceedings. I considered this. The house in Riverside had been my home for nearly 50 years. I'd chosen every paint color, planted every tree in the yard, selected every piece of furniture, yet now, the thought of returning to it filled me with a strange emptiness. Tell them I need time to consider my options, I said finally. I'm just beginning to figure out what I want my life to look like going forward. Of course, Marcus agreed. There's no rush on this decision. Focus on enjoying Florence. We'll handle things here. After the call, I sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint the buildings in shades of gold and pink. The contrast between the chaos unfolding in Connecticut and the peaceful moment I was experiencing in Florence couldn't have been more stark. For 50 years, I'd built my identity around being Robert Wilson's wife, creating a home and family defined largely by his needs and preferences. Now, with that foundation shattered, I was facing questions I'd never had to answer before. Who was Margaret Wilson without Robert? What did she want? What brought her joy? What kind of life did she envision for her remaining years? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in decades, I felt genuinely curious to find out. The next 2 weeks in Florence passed in a blur of new experiences. My watercolor class became the anchor of my week, 3 hours every Tuesday, and Thursday morning spent learning to capture light and shadow on paper. My first attempts were embarrassingly amateur, but my instructor, Paolo, encouraged me with genuine enthusiasm. You have good eye for composition, he told me in his halting English. Technique comes with practice. Eye for beauty. That is the gift. I wasn't sure I believed him, but I found myself looking forward to each class, carrying my small sketchbook everywhere to practice capturing scenes around the city. The physical act of painting, the concentration required, the focus on something outside myself, provided a respite from the constant undercurrent of anxiety about the situation back home. My volunteer position at the after-school program proved equally fulfilling. Twice a week, I helped Italian teenagers practice their conversational English. Their eagerness to learn, their curiosity about American culture, and their youthful energy were contagious. With them, I was Teacher Margaret, not Robert's wife, not Jennifer's mother, just a woman with knowledge to share. Teacher Margaret, 16-year-old Lucia asked during one session, "Why you come to Florence alone? No husband? No family?" The question, innocent as it was, caught me off guard. I had deliberately avoided sharing details of my personal situation with anyone here. "I'm taking some time for myself," I answered carefully, "to discover who I am outside of those roles." Lucia nodded, her expression serious beyond her years. "My grandmother says you never too old to find yourself. She start painting at 75. Now she has gallery show." Her words stayed with me long after the session ended. You're never too old to find yourself. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. Back at my apartment that evening, I received an email from Connor, Eleanor's nephew who had first alerted me to Catherine's existence in Boston. He had attached a news article with the subject line, "You should see this." The article was from a financial industry publication reporting that Catherine Winters had been arrested in Boston, charged with being a co-conspirator in Robert's investment fraud scheme. According to the piece, she was cooperating with authorities, claiming she had been manipulated by Robert and was unaware of the full extent of the fraud. I read the article twice, a strange mix of emotions swirling within me. On one hand, Catherine's arrest validated what Connor had told me and confirmed the depth of Robert's deception. On the other hand, Her claim of being an unwitting pawn rang hollow. She ran an investment firm. Surely she would have recognized the red flags in Robert's financial activities. Then again, who was I to judge? I'd lived with the man for 50 years and had missed all the signs. My phone rang, Jennifer calling for our daily check-in. "Have you seen the news?" she asked immediately. "About Catherine Winters?" "Yes. Connor sent me the article." "Not just that," Jennifer said, her voice tight with stress. "The FBI raided Aunt Eleanor's gallery in Philadelphia this morning. They're saying she helped launder money through art, purchases, and sales." This was new information. Eleanor, too? I thought she was just another victim. Apparently not. According to the investigators, she knew about the fraud for at least the past 5 years and actively participated in covering it up. Jennifer paused. "Mom, they interviewed me again yesterday. They wanted to know if Dad ever involved me in his investment activities." Alarm shot through me. "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that he occasionally asked me to courier documents to clients or banks when I was traveling for work, but I never knew what was in them. They seemed satisfied with that explanation. But—" Her voice trailed off. "But what, Jenny?" She sighed heavily. "They're looking at everyone connected to Dad, especially family members. Daniel's under intense scrutiny because of those accounts in his name. My professional reputation is taking a hit. Clients are leaving the firm, afraid of any association with the Wilson name." My heart ached for her. "I'm so sorry. Do you need me to come home?" "No," she said firmly. "There's nothing you could do here except get dragged further into this mess. Stay in Florence. At least one of us should be finding some peace." Peace was perhaps too strong a word for what I was experiencing in Florence, but I understood what she meant. Here, I was largely sheltered from the daily revelations and public scrutiny surrounding Robert's case. "How's Tyler handling everything?" I asked. "Better than I expected, actually. He's angry at Grandpa, of course, but he's channeling it into a school project on financial ethics. His teacher says it's quite remarkable." I smiled, proud of my grandson's resilience. He's a remarkable young man. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the evening settle over Florence, processing this new wave of revelations. Eleanor, whom I'd initially seen as another victim of Robert's deception, was potentially a co-conspirator. Catherine was claiming innocence despite her financial expertise. And my daughter and grandson were bearing the burden of Robert's actions, their lives irrevocably altered by choices they hadn't made. A soft knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Gabriella, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Buonasera," she said with a warm smile. "I thought perhaps you might enjoy company tonight." I hesitated only briefly before inviting her in. Over the past 2 weeks, Gabriella had become something of a friend, introducing me to hidden gems in Florence and helping me navigate the occasional cultural confusion. "You look troubled," she observed as she poured the wine. "Bad news from home?" I nodded, not ready to share the specifics, but grateful for her perception. "Family complications." Gabriella settled into a chair opposite me on the balcony. "Family is always complicated. My sister and I, we did not speak for 15 years over a misunderstanding about our mother's necklace." 15 years? That's a long time to hold a grudge. She shrugged. "Italians, we are passionate. But now we speak every day. Time has a way of sorting what matters from what does not." Her simple philosophy resonated with me. "How did you reconcile?" "Her husband died suddenly. I went to funeral. She cried. I cried. The necklace seemed so small then." Gabriella took a sip of wine. "Sometimes life must shake us to show us what is truly important." Life had certainly shaken me, violently and without warning. The foundations I'd built my existence upon had crumbled, forcing me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about: my marriage, my family, even myself. I was married for 50 years, I found myself saying. I thought I knew my husband completely. I was wrong. Gabriella's eyes softened with understanding. Ah, this is why you come to Florence alone. Yes, I admitted. I needed distance to think clearly. And are you? Thinking clearly? The question gave me pause. Was I? Or was I simply hiding in the beauty of Florence, avoiding the difficult decisions waiting for me back home? I'm trying, I said finally. Some days are clearer than others. Gabriella reached across the small table to pat my hand. When my husband left me for his secretary, so cliché, no? I was lost. 27 years together, gone like smoke. I thought my life was finished. What did you do? I asked, curious about this unexpected revelation. First I cry, many days, many tears. She smiled wryly. Then I buy this building with my divorce settlement. Now I have apartments to rent, income of my own, and no man to tell me how to manage it. It was not the life I planned, but it is a good life. Her story touched something in me. A recognition that beyond the pain of betrayal could lie unexpected opportunities for growth and self-discovery. I haven't decided what to do about my house in Connecticut, I confessed. My lawyer says, my husband's attorney is pushing for me to give up my claim to it. And do you want this house still? I considered the question seriously. I don't know. It holds 50 years of memories, raising my daughter, holidays, gardening. But it also represents a life built on lies. Gabriella nodded thoughtfully. Houses are just walls and roof. Home is feeling you carry inside. She gestured around her. For me, apartment in Florence became more home in 5 years than house with my husband was in 27. Her perspective was refreshingly straightforward, cutting through the emotional tangle I'd been caught in regarding the Riverside house. Was I clinging to it out of genuine attachment, or habit, or fear of more change? Thank you, I said sincerely. You've given me something important to think about. After Gabriella left, I pulled out my phone and composed an email to Marcus, making a decision that had been percolating since our last conversation. After careful consideration, I am willing to relinquish my claim to the house in Riverside, with conditions. I want a fair monetary settlement that reflects my half of the property's value, minus any legal encumbrances from Robert's case. I also want to arrange to collect my personal belongings, family photographs, my mother's china, my teaching awards, and other items of sentimental value. Please draft the necessary documents and advise me on next steps. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then sat back, feeling a curious lightness. The house had been my domain for so long, the center of my identity as wife and mother. Letting it go felt simultaneously like loss and liberation. My phone rang almost immediately, Marcus calling. I just read your email, he said, skipping pleasantries. Are you absolutely certain about the house? Once we move forward with this, it will be difficult to reverse course. I'm certain, I replied with more confidence than I'd expected to feel. The house belongs to a life I'm no longer living. Understood. I'll draw up the paperwork and be in touch with Robert's counsel. He paused. There's something else you should know. The prosecution has reached out to discuss your potential testimony. My pulse quickened. Testimony? Against Robert? Yes. They're building their case and believe your perspective as his wife of 50 years would be compelling. You wouldn't be asked to testify about the financial specifics, just about his character, his patterns of behavior, anything that might illuminate his state of mind or intent. The thought of standing in a courtroom, publicly recounting the intimate details of my failed marriage while Robert watched, made my stomach clench. Do I have to decide now? I asked. No, not immediately, but they'll want to interview you. Eventually, whether or not you ultimately testify at trial. When would this interview take place? That's the other reason I was going to call you. They've asked if you'd be willing to speak with them via video conference next week. They understand you're in Italy and aren't asking you to return, yet. I took a deep breath. Tell them I'll do the video interview. I'll need to think about testifying at trial. Of course. I'll be with you during the interview to protect your interests. Marcus's tone softened slightly. How are you doing over there, Mrs. Wilson? Really doing? The question caught me off guard. Marcus had always been professionally warm, but maintained appropriate boundaries. I'm finding my way, I answered honestly. Florence is helping me see things more clearly. Good. You deserve that clarity after everything you've been through. He hesitated. If you don't mind my saying so, you sound different, stronger, more decisive. His observation startled me, but as I considered it, I realized he was right. The woman who had sat in his office just weeks ago, shell-shocked by her husband's betrayal, was indeed different from the woman I was becoming in Florence. Thank you, I said. I think I am stronger now. Or perhaps I'm remembering strength I always had, but forgot how to use. After we hung up, I opened my sketchbook and began drawing the view from my balcony, the street below, the buildings across the way, the particular quality of the evening light on terracotta tiles. The scene had become familiar to me over the past weeks, a constant in the midst of so much change. As I worked, I found myself thinking about the interview with prosecutors next week. What would I say about Robert? About our marriage? About the man I thought I knew versus the man he actually was? The next morning, I woke early and walked to a cafe near the Duomo that had become my regular breakfast spot. The owner, Marco, greeted me by name and had my usual order, cappuccino and a cornetto, ready before I even asked. Buongiorno, Signora Margaret, he said cheerfully. Beautiful day, yes? Bellissimo, I agreed, using one of the Italian words I'd mastered. As I sat at my usual table by the window, watching Florence come to life, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was from Eleanor Moran. My breath caught in my throat. In the week since discovering her existence, I had spoken with Eleanor only once. That initial meeting in the cafe halfway between Riverside and Philadelphia. Now, with her gallery raided and her potential involvement in Robert's crimes exposed, what could she possibly want from me? The email was brief. Maggie, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need to speak with you urgently. There are things about Robert you should know, things that may affect you legally and financially. I'm reaching out because, despite everything, I believe we are both victims here, though perhaps in different ways. I understand you're in Florence. I can arrange a video call at your convenience. Eleanor. I stared at the screen, conflicted. My initial impulse was to delete the message and block her address. This woman had been involved with my husband for 23 years, possibly aided in his financial crimes, and now wanted to talk? The audacity was breathtaking, yet something in her wording gave me pause. Things about Robert you should know, things that may affect you legally and financially. If Eleanor did have information that could protect me from further fallout, from Robert's actions, wouldn't I be foolish to ignore it? I finished my breakfast contemplating my options. By the time I paid Marco and began my walk back to the apartment, I had decided. I would hear what Eleanor had to say, but with Marcus present to protect my interests. I replied to her email. Eleanor, I'm willing to speak with you, but only with my attorney present. He can set up a secure video call. Please contact Marcus Chen at the email address below to arrange a time. Maggie. Within an hour, my phone rang, Marcus calling. Mrs. Wilson, I've just received a call from Eleanor Moran's attorney. She's apparently quite eager to speak with you. Did they say what about? Only that it concerns information potentially relevant to your financial interests in the divorce and the broader investigation. Marcus sounded cautious. I've agreed to set up a video call for tomorrow morning. My time, which would be early afternoon for you in Florence. I strongly recommend you take the call from my office, virtually of course, rather than your personal device. Of course, I agreed. Do you think she's genuinely trying to help? Or is this some kind of trap? Hard to say. Her legal situation is precarious at best. She could be looking to make a deal with prosecutors by offering information or seeking to align her story with yours. He paused. Or she could genuinely have information you need to protect yourself. We'll proceed carefully. The rest of the day passed with an undercurrent of tension. I attended my watercolor class, but found it difficult to concentrate. Paolo noticed my distraction. Your mind is elsewhere today, he observed as he looked at my half-finished painting of the Ponte Vecchio. The bridge will still be here tomorrow. Perhaps today is day for wandering, not painting. Taking his advice, I packed up my supplies early and spent the afternoon walking through parts of Florence I hadn't yet explored. Physical movement helped clear my head, and by evening, I felt more centered. That night, I dreamed of Robert, not the Robert who had betrayed me, but the young man I had married, earnest and ambitious, promising to build a life with me. In the dream, we were in Florence together, walking along the Arno, planning our future. I woke with tears on my face, mourning not just the marriage I had lost, but the one I had thought I had all along. The video call with Eleanor was scheduled for 2 p.m. Florence time. I set up my laptop in the apartment, making sure the Wi-Fi connection was strong and finding a neutral background, a plain wall rather than the personal space of my temporary home. At exactly 2 p.m., Marcus initiated the call. His face appeared first, professionally composed in his Connecticut office. Then Eleanor joined, and I was struck by how tired she looked, her usual elegant appearance marred by dark circles under her eyes and an overall pallor. Mrs. Wilson, Ms. Moran, Marcus began formally. I'm recording this conversation with both of your permission, for record-keeping purposes only. This is not an official deposition or statement. We both agreed, and then an awkward silence fell. Eleanor was the first to break it. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, Maggie, she said, her voice hoarse. I know this is unconventional, to say the least. What information do you have that concerns me? I asked directly, not interested in pleasantries. She glanced down, then back at the camera. First, I want you to know that I've accepted a plea deal. I'll be pleading guilty to reduced charges in exchange for my testimony against Robert. That's not why I'm contacting you. I just thought you should hear it from me rather than the news. I nodded, unsurprised. And? The reason I wanted to speak with you is about Geneva. The name meant nothing to me. Geneva? The city in Switzerland? Eleanor's expression registered surprise. No, Geneva Harris, Robert's third wife. The world seemed to tilt underneath me. Third wife? What are you talking about? Eleanor and Marcus exchanged a look of confusion. You don't know about Geneva? Eleanor asked carefully. I know about you in Philadelphia and Catherine in Boston, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. Are you saying there's another woman? Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. Not just another woman. Another legal wife. Robert and Geneva Harris were married in Las Vegas 15 years ago. She lives in Chicago. That's impossible, I protested. Robert couldn't legally marry anyone else while still married to me. He used a different identity, Eleanor explained. Robert Morgan, the same name he used with Catherine. He established that identity decades ago, complete with social security number, credit history, employment records. Marcus leaned forward, his legal mind clearly processing the implications. Are you certain about this? Do you have documentation? The FBI has it all, Eleanor confirmed. They found the marriage certificate, joint property deeds, tax returns filed as husband and wife. Geneva has a daughter with Robert, Olivia, 13 years old. A daughter. The word hit me like a physical blow. Robert had another child, a daughter I'd never known existed, born when he was in his late 50s. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Why are you telling me this now? Because Geneva doesn't know about the charges against Robert yet, Eleanor replied. The FBI is planning to interview her tomorrow. They've been building their case carefully, moving from one jurisdiction to another, and because... She hesitated. Because Robert has significant assets in joint accounts with Geneva that haven't been frozen yet, assets that should rightfully be considered in your divorce settlement. Marcus was already taking notes. What kind of assets? Where are they held? Investment accounts primarily. A lakefront property in Michigan. Art and collectibles in a Chicago storage facility. Eleanor looked directly at me through the screen. Maggie, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm telling you this because I realized something when the FBI agents were tearing apart my gallery, questioning my integrity, my judgment, my entire life. We, you, me, Catherine, Geneva, we've all been pawns in Robert's game. He played us against each other without us even knowing the others existed. Her words rang with painful truth. Robert had masterfully compartmentalized his life, giving each woman just enough of himself to maintain the illusion of commitment while keeping us safely separated in different cities, different contexts. How did you find out about Geneva? I asked. During my FBI interviews, they showed me photographs, financial records. They asked if I'd ever met her or known about her. I hadn't. Eleanor's expression hardened. That's when I understood the full extent of Robert's deception. It wasn't just about money. It was about power, the power to create and maintain multiple realities, to control the narrative in each of our lives. I thought about my 50 years with Robert, how he had shaped our life together according to his preferences, how I had gradually ceded control of so many aspects of our existence, financial, social, even personal. Had that been deliberate on his part? A way of ensuring I remained contained, predictable, easily managed? Ms. Moran, Marcus interjected. What specifically are you suggesting Mrs. Wilson do with this information? Contact Geneva before the FBI does, Eleanor replied promptly. Not to warn her or interfere with the investigation, but to establish a connection. The prosecutors are building their case methodically, but they're also human. Right now, they see 4 separate households, 4 separate frauds. If you and Geneva present a united front as legal wives who were deceived, it strengthens both your positions regarding asset recovery. Marcus looked skeptical. That's a significant legal strategy you're proposing, one that would require careful consideration and potentially coordination between separate counsel. I understand, Eleanor acknowledged. I'm just sharing what my attorneys have advised me. The more we appear as victims rather than potential accomplices, the better our chances of emerging from this with some financial security. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Eleanor providing details about Geneva, her background as a pediatric surgeon, her home address in Chicago, the private school Olivia attended. By the time we ended the call, my head was swimming with new information, new betrayals, new complications. What do you think? I asked Marcus once Eleanor had disconnected. He sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Her information about Geneva Harris appears genuine, though we'll need to verify it independently. Her suggestion about contacting Geneva has some strategic merit, but also carries risks. If approached incorrectly, Geneva could perceive it as threatening or manipulative. And do you think I should do it? Contact Geneva? Marcus considered the question carefully. From a purely legal perspective, establishing communication with Geneva before the FBI interviews could potentially benefit both of you in terms of asset recovery. From a personal perspective, he hesitated. That's entirely your decision, Mrs. Wilson. This is already an emotionally complex situation. After we ended the call, I sat motionless at my laptop, trying to process everything I'd learned, Another wife, another daughter, another home. How many lives had Robert created and maintained? How many versions of himself had he crafted and performed? And who was the real Robert Wilson? Was there even such a person anymore, or just a collection of personas tailored to different audiences? I stepped onto my balcony, needing fresh air. Florence continued its afternoon rhythms below, shopkeepers chatting with customers, tourists, consulting maps, locals walking purposefully to appointments, life continuing, regardless of my personal upheaval. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Everything okay? You usually check in by now." I hesitated. Should I tell her about Geneva? About her 13-year-old half-sister Olivia? The revelation would devastate her all over again, force her to recalibrate her understanding of her father once more. "All fine," I texted back. "Had a meeting with Marcus. We'll call later with update." I needed time to process this information myself before sharing it with Jennifer. And I needed to decide whether to contact Geneva Harris, the other legal Mrs. Wilson, before the FBI turned her life upside down tomorrow. In the end, the decision crystallized with surprising clarity. If our positions were reversed, wouldn't I want to know what was coming? Wouldn't I want the perspective of someone who understood exactly what I was about to experience? I drafted an email to the address Eleanor had provided. "Dr. Harris, my name is Margaret Wilson. This message will come as a shock, but I believe we share a husband, Robert Wilson, who you may know as Robert Morgan. I recently discovered his multiple lives and identities, including his marriage to you. The FBI will be contacting you tomorrow regarding Robert's arrest and ongoing investigation for financial fraud. I understand this is overwhelming information to receive from a stranger, but I thought you deserved some warning before your world changes irrevocably. If you wish to speak, my number is below. If not, I understand completely. Sincerely, Margaret Wilson." I read it over twice, then hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I called Jennifer, bracing myself for one of the most difficult conversations of my life. Geneva Harris called at 6 the next morning. I had barely slept, anticipating this moment, rehearsing what I might say to the woman who, like me, had built a life with Robert without knowing the full truth. "Is this Margaret Wilson?" Her voice was controlled, professional, the voice of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news calmly. "Yes, this is Maggie," I replied, sitting up in bed and switching on the lamp. "Thank you for calling, Dr. Harris. Please call me Geneva." A pause. "I received your email last night. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake or scam. Then I started searching online and found the news articles about Robert's arrest." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I know how shocking this must be." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Shocking doesn't begin to cover it. I'm a pediatric surgeon. I deal with unexpected situations every day. But this, finding out my husband of 15 years has another wife, wives, plural, it's beyond comprehension." "I understand completely," I assured her. I felt the same way when I discovered the truth. "How did you find out?" Geneva asked, her professional composure momentarily slipping. "What tipped you off?" I told her about the phone bill, the initial confrontation with Robert, the gradual unraveling of his elaborate deception. 50 years, she murmured when I finished. "You were married to him for 50 years, and he still did this to you. I don't even have words." "How much do you know about the charges against him?" I asked. "Just what I could find online last night. Financial fraud, Ponzi scheme, multiple identities. The articles mention you and someone named Eleanor. Moran, but not me or Catherine Winters." Her voice caught slightly. "How many of us are there, do you think?" "As far as I know, 4, I replied. "But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there were more we haven't discovered yet." Geneva was silent for a moment. When she spoke, again, her voice was steadier, resolute. The FBI will be here at 9. What should I expect? I shared what I knew of the investigation process, the types of questions they'd likely ask, the documents they might request, the potential implications for her financially and legally. My attorney suggested it might be beneficial for us to coordinate our approaches to asset recovery, I added. Yes, that makes sense, Geneva agreed. I should probably find an attorney who specializes in this kind of situation, if such a specialty even exists. Another pause. What about your daughter? How is she handling all this? It's been incredibly difficult for her, I admitted. Robert was her hero. Finding out about his double, quadruple life has shaken her foundation. And Olivia, Geneva said softly. My daughter doesn't know anything yet. She adores her father. This will destroy her. The mention of Olivia, Robert's other daughter, Jennifer's half-sister, sent a fresh wave of sadness through me. How old is she? 13, just starting to navigate the complexities of adolescence, and now this. Geneva's professional demeanor cracked further. How do I tell her? How do I explain that her father has been living a lie our entire family life? It was the same question Jennifer had faced in telling Tyler about his grandfather's deception. There's no perfect way, I said gently. But in my experience with my grandson, honesty appropriate to her age level is best. Children are remarkably resilient, and they sense when adults are hiding things. Geneva took a deep breath. You're right, of course. I'll have to tell her soon before she hears it elsewhere. She hesitated. Would you be willing to speak with me again after the FBI interview? Compare notes, so to speak? Of course, I agreed readily. Call any time. After we hung up, I lay back in bed, watching the early morning light play across the ceiling of my Florence apartment. The conversation with Geneva had been surreal. Two strangers connected by a man who had betrayed them both, navigating uncharted territory together. What kind of person was capable of maintaining 4 separate families, 4 distinct identities, for decades? The logistical complexity alone was staggering, not to mention the emotional compartmentalization required. Had Robert ever felt guilt, remorse? Or had he simply enjoyed the power, the secret knowledge that he was orchestrating multiple lives while each of us remained oblivious? These questions had consumed me initially, but now I found them losing their urgency. Robert's motivations, his psychological makeup, these were becoming less important to me than my own path forward. I got up and prepared for the day, a simple breakfast on the balcony, then a walk to the Boboli Gardens where I planned to sketch. The routine I'd established in Florence provided a stabilizing framework amid the continuing revelations and upheavals. At the gardens, I found a quiet bench with a view of the fountains and opened my sketchbook. As I began to capture the scene before me, my phone rang, Jennifer calling. Mom, she said without preamble. Did you know Dad has another daughter? My pencil stilled. Yes, I just found out yesterday. I was going to call you about it today. The FBI told me this morning. Olivia Morgan Harris. She's 13, Mom. Dad has a teenage daughter with another woman. Jennifer's voice cracked. All those business trips to Chicago. He was visiting his other family, his other daughter. I know, honey. I'm so sorry. I don't understand how he could do this. Any of it. Jennifer sounded utterly lost. I thought I knew him. We all did, I said softly. He made sure of that. I should be angry, she continued. I should hate him for what he's done to our family, to you. But mostly I just feel sad. Sad for all the years of lies. Sad for this girl who's about to have her world shattered. Sad for all of us who loved someone who didn't really exist. Her. Words echoed my own emotional evolution, from shock to anger to a profound sadness for all that had been lost, all that had never truly existed. I spoke with Geneva, Olivia's mother, this morning, I told her. She's a pediatric surgeon. She seems like a good person caught in an impossible situation, just like us. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Do you think I should reach out to her? To Olivia? They're family in some twisted way. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't considered the possibility of Jennifer connecting with Robert's other daughter. That's entirely your decision, I said carefully. But you might want to give Geneva some time to process everything first, to tell Olivia in her own way. Of course, Jennifer agreed. I'm not rushing into anything. I just keep thinking. This girl is my sister, half-sister. She's Tyler's aunt, technically. It's all so bizarre. Life has certainly taken some unexpected turns lately, I acknowledged. After speaking with Jennifer, I tried to return to my sketching, but found my concentration broken. Too many thoughts crowded my mind. Geneva facing FBI agents, Olivia about to learn devastating truths about her father, Jennifer processing the existence of a half-sister, Robert sitting in a detention center as his elaborately constructed life imploded around him. I packed up my supplies and walked instead, letting the beauty of Florence wash over me, the historic architecture, the artistry evident in every detail, the rhythm of life that had continued here for centuries, regardless of personal dramas or global events. Near the Uffizi Gallery, I passed a small jewelry shop with handcrafted pieces displayed in the window. One necklace caught my eye. A simple silver pendant shaped like a door key with the word Libertà engraved on it. Freedom. On impulse, I entered the shop. The elderly craftsman explained in halting English that he created each piece himself, inspired by Florentine symbols and traditions. This key, he said, pointing to the pendant I'd admired, is from Old Door in Oltrarno. District. Very old family home, many generations. Now, new beginning as art studio. It's beautiful, I told him. I'll take it. As he wrapped the necklace, he asked if it was a gift. No, I replied. It's for me. A reminder. Back at my apartment, I fastened the necklace around my neck, the key pendant cool against my skin. A literal key to a door that no longer existed. Transformed into something new. It felt symbolically perfect for this phase of my life. That evening, Geneva called again as promised. The FBI agents just left, she said, sounding exhausted. 5 hours of questions, document reviews, explanations of legal implications. They were professional but thorough. How are you holding up? I asked. Honestly, I'm oscillating between numbness and fury. Her voice hardened. They showed me evidence that Robert has been siphoning money from my practice's retirement accounts. Accounts I asked him to manage because he was supposedly a financial expert. Turns out he was using my hard-earned money to fund his other lives. The revelation didn't surprise me anymore. He did the same with Eleanor's art gallery and Catherine's investment firm. It was all interconnected, each life funding the others. The agents confirmed that, Geneva said. They described it as a closed-loop Ponzi scheme, with each household unknowingly supporting the others through manipulated investments. She sighed heavily. I've spent my entire career saving children's lives, and now I find out my husband was stealing from me, from my colleagues, from the very institution where I work. Did they mention asset seizures? I asked, thinking of my own concerns about financial security. Yes, they're freezing most of our accounts pending investigation. They've allowed me access to my personal checking account for living expenses, but everything else is temporarily inaccessible. Her voice caught, including Olivia's college fund. My heart sank. Tyler's college fund had been similarly impacted, another generation paying for Robert's deceptions. Have you told Olivia? Yet? I asked gently. I have to pick her up from school in an hour, Geneva replied. I've been rehearsing what to say, but nothing seems adequate. She paused. The most difficult part is that Robert was supposed to visit this weekend. He comes every third weekend. Like clockwork, has for years. Olivia's been planning a father-daughter science project for school. She'll be devastated when I tell her he's not coming. Ever. The pain in her voice was raw, familiar, the same pain I'd heard in Jennifer's voice when discussing Tyler's reaction. Children suffering for the sins of their grandfather, their father. If there's anything I can do, I offered, though I wasn't sure what help I could possibly provide from across an ocean. Actually, there might be, Geneva said thoughtfully. Your daughter, Jennifer, would she be open to speaking with me sometime? It might help to talk with someone who understands this specific situation, who's a few steps ahead in processing it all. I think she would, I replied. She mentioned possibly reaching out to you herself, though she wasn't sure if it would be welcome. It would, Geneva confirmed. We're unwillingly connected by this mess. Maybe together we can figure out how to navigate it. Before we hung up, I shared Marcus's contact information with her, suggesting she reach out to coordinate legal strategies. She promised to call again after speaking with Olivia. That night, I had trouble sleeping again. I kept thinking about Geneva telling her daughter about Robert's arrest, about his other families, about Olivia learning that the father she adored was not the man she thought he was, about Jennifer and Olivia, sisters who had never known about each other, possibly connecting across the wreckage of their father's deception. Families torn apart and perhaps new connections forged from the fragments. It wasn't the neat, happy ending anyone would have chosen, but it was the reality we were all navigating now. The next morning, I received an email from Gabriella. Kara. Margaret, a small apartment in my building becomes available next month. The current tenant is moving to Rome for work. It is smaller than your vacation rental, but with better light for painting. Perfect for someone who wants to stay in Florence. Longer term. Let me know if you are interested in seeing it. Gabriella. I stared at the email, surprised by the mix of emotions it evoked. Excitement at the possibility of extending my stay in Florence. Anxiety about making such a significant change. Uncertainty about my long-term plans. I hadn't considered staying beyond my initial 1-month rental, yet the idea held immediate appeal. Florence had become more than just an escape from the chaos in Connecticut. It had become a place of discovery, of new skills, new friendships, new aspects of myself. The watercolor classes, the volunteer teaching, the daily rhythms of life. In this ancient city, all had helped me begin reconstructing my sense of identity beyond being Robert's wife. I replied to Gabriella that I would indeed like to see the apartment, then headed to my volunteer session at the after-school program. The teenagers were working on a project about their aspirations, practicing English by describing their future goals. Teacher Margaret, Lucia asked during a break, what was your dream when you were young like us? The question gave me pause. What had been my dreams before marriage, before motherhood, before 50 years of being Mrs. Robert Wilson? I wanted to teach overseas, I answered slowly. To live in different countries, experience different cultures. And did you do this? Another student, Marco, asked. No, I admitted. Life took me in another direction. But you are here now, Lucia pointed out with adolescent certainty. So maybe dream just waited for right time. Her simple observation struck me with unexpected force. Maybe that was exactly what was happening. Dreams deferred, not dreams denied. Maybe 70 wasn't too late to pursue aspirations I'd set aside half a century ago. After the session, I walked back to my apartment deep in thought. At a cafe along the way, I stopped for an espresso, something I'd never done alone in Connecticut but had come to enjoy in Florence. The owner, who recognized me as a regular, smiled as I took my usual table by the window. Signora Margaret, always so thoughtful, he commented as he brought my coffee. You see more in 1 hour at this window than most tourists see in a week. I smiled, appreciating his observation. I had become a more observant person here, more attuned to details, the way light changed throughout the day, the interactions between locals and visitors. the rhythms and patterns of Florentine life. My watercolor instructor had noticed it too, commenting on my improving ability to capture not just the appearance of a scene, but its essence. Back at my apartment, I found an email from Marcus with an update on the legal proceedings. Roberts. Trial date had been set for 6 months from now. The FBI had discovered yet another property, a cabin in Vermont registered to yet another variation of Robert's name, suggesting the possibility of another relationship, another life we hadn't yet uncovered. I was surprised by my own reaction to this news, not shock or renewed anger, but a weary acceptance. Of course, there might be more. Robert's capacity for compartmentalization, for deception, seemed limitless, but each new revelation affected me less personally than the last, as if Robert and his actions were becoming increasingly distant from my current reality. Later that evening, Jennifer video called with Tyler. My grandson's face lit up the screen, his expression more animated than I'd seen it in weeks. "Grandma, Mom says you might stay in Italy longer. Are you going to become Italian now?" I laughed at his enthusiasm. "Not quite, but I am thinking about extending my stay." "That's awesome," he declared. "You can learn Italian and then teach me, and maybe I can visit during summer break?" The idea of Tyler visiting me in Florence, of showing him this beautiful city, sent a surge of joy through me. "I would love that," I told him sincerely. After Tyler wandered off, Jennifer remained on the call. "You look different, Mom," she observed. "More relaxed, somehow." "I feel different," I acknowledged. "Florence has been good for me. I spoke with Geneva Harris yesterday," Jennifer said, changing the subject. "It was strange, but good, I think. We're going to meet for coffee next week with Olivia." She hesitated. "Is that okay with you?" "Of course it is," I assured her. "Why wouldn't it be?" "I don't know. It feels complicated, like I'm betraying you somehow by connecting with Dad's other family." I shook my head firmly. "You're not betraying anyone. Geneva and Olivia are innocent in all this, just like us. If building a relationship with them feels right to you, you should absolutely do it." Jennifer looked relieved. "Thanks, Mom. I wasn't sure how you'd feel." "I'm well past the point of being hurt by anything related to your father," I said truthfully. "My focus now is on moving forward, for myself, for you, for Tyler. Life is too short to be defined by someone else's." Betrayal. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, reflecting on how much had changed in just over a month. The woman who had first arrived in Florence, shell-shocked, grief-stricken, identity shattered, was evolving into someone new, or perhaps, as Lucia had suggested, into someone who had been there all along, waiting for the right time to emerge. The next day, Gabriella showed me the available apartment. It was indeed smaller than my current rental, but with a north-facing window perfect for an artist's studio and a tiny kitchen that could be made functional with some creativity. The rent was reasonable, especially compared to housing costs in Connecticut. "You can have lease for 6 months, 1 year, whatever you prefer," Gabriella explained as we stood in the empty space. "Month to month is also possible for little more cost." I ran my hand along the windowsill, imagining my watercolors arranged there, the Florentine light illuminating my work. "I'll take it," I decided. 6 months to start, with option to extend. Gabriella beamed. "Excellent. I will prepare papers." As we walked back downstairs, she asked casually, "So, you are staying in Florence for good?" "Not necessarily for good," I replied, "but for now. I'm not ready to return to Connecticut yet." "And your husband? The complications you mentioned?" I touched the key pendant at my neck. "We're divorcing. It's complicated, yes, but becoming less so as I gain distance and perspective." Gabriella nodded understandingly. "Sometimes we must step away to see clearly." That evening, I called Marcus to update him on my decision to extend my stay in Florence. 6 more months in Italy? He repeated. I understand the appeal, Mrs. Wilson, but there are practicalities to consider. The investigation is ongoing. The divorce proceedings will eventually require your presence. I know, I acknowledged, and I'll return when absolutely necessary. But right now, Florence is where I need to be. May I ask why? His tone was curious, not challenging. I considered the question carefully, because here, I'm just Margaret, not Robert's wife, not Jennifer's mother, not the woman whose husband turned out to be running a decades-long con. Here, I'm discovering who I am outside of those roles and relationships. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I understand, he said finally. We'll make it work. Video conferences for necessary interviews, powers of attorney for certain legal matters. The court system moves slowly enough that your physical presence won't be required for months. After handling the practical details, I took a cooking class offered through a local cultural center, something I'd wanted to try since arriving in Florence. The 3-hour session focused on traditional Tuscan cuisine, with a small group working together to prepare a complete meal under the guidance of a local chef. My assigned cooking partner was an American woman named Diane, a retired professor from California who had moved to Florence after her wife's death 2 years earlier. Italy was our dream retirement destination, she explained as we chopped vegetables together. After Susan died, I almost gave up on the plan. Then I realized she would have wanted me to do it anyway, to honor the dream we'd shared. That took courage, I observed. Diane shrugged. Grief gives you a certain freedom. When you've survived the worst, other changes seem less daunting. Her perspective resonated with me. My own worst-case scenario had already happened. The discovery of Robert's betrayal, the collapse of my marriage, the public humiliation of his arrest and fraud charges. What was left to fear? Certainly not a temporary move to Florence, not pursuing art or teaching or whatever else might call to me now. We exchanged contact information after the class, agreeing to meet for coffee the following week. Another small connection forming in my new life, another thread in the tapestry I was beginning to weave. The next morning, Geneva called with news. The FBI has discovered another woman, she said without preamble. In Vermont, Margaret Harris, apparently named after you, which is somehow even more twisted. Despite everything, the detail took me aback. Robert had named another woman after me? The psychological complexity of that choice was beyond my comprehension. Does she have children with him too? I asked, wondering if there were more siblings for Jennifer and Olivia to discover. Not according to the agents, Geneva replied. She's younger, 48. Their relationship appears to have started about 10 years ago. She thought he was divorced, living primarily in New York with occasional travels for work. Another variation, another carefully crafted narrative. Robert's ability to keep his stories straight across 5 relationships over decades was almost admirable in its perverse dedication. Have they interviewed her yet? I asked. Yesterday. They said she was devastated, but cooperating. Geneva paused. Jennifer is coming for coffee tomorrow. Olivia is nervous but curious about meeting her half-sister. How is Olivia handling? Everything? I asked, thinking of the 13-year-old whose world had been upended. Better than I expected, actually. She's angry at her father, confused about what was real in their relationship. But she's also remarkably resilient. She told me yesterday that at least now she understands why he was never available for her school events during the week. Geneva's voice caught. Children adapt, sometimes more easily than adults. After we hung up, I took my sketchbook to a favorite spot along the Arno. As I sketched the play of light on the water, I reflected on the expanding ripple effect of Robert's actions. 5 women, 3 children, countless friends, colleagues, and extended family members, all impacted by his elaborate deception. Yet even as the damage continued to spread, healing was beginning too. Jennifer connecting with Geneva and Olivia. Tyler planning a visit to Florence. Me finding new purpose. Through art and teaching, we were all finding ways to move forward, to reconstruct our lives around the crater Robert had left. 3 days later, I officially signed the lease for my new apartment and began planning the move from my temporary rental. The transition felt significant, a deliberate choice to extend my time in Florence rather than an impulsive escape from Connecticut. I also officially joined the volunteer teaching program on a regular schedule, committed to twice-weekly sessions, helping Italian teenagers with their English. The program director was delighted, mentioning that they were considering expanding to include adult education if they could find experienced teachers. "Would you be interested in developing curriculum for adult learners?" she asked. "Your background in education would be perfect for this." The offer was unexpected but intriguing, a chance to use my professional skills in a meaningful way, to build something new that would benefit others. "I'd be honored," I told her. "Let me think about what might work best." That evening, I received an email from Jennifer with a photo attached. It showed her sitting in a cafe with Geneva and Olivia, all three smiling tentatively at the camera. The caption read simply, "New connections. Complicated but good." Looking at the image of my daughter with Robert's other family, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for the circumstances that had brought them together, admiration for their courage in reaching across the wreckage of Robert's deception, hope for the relationships that might grow from this difficult beginning. I wrote back immediately. "Thank you for sharing this. You all look beautiful. I'm proud of you for being open to this connection despite everything." Jennifer replied within minutes. "Geneva is remarkable. Strong, compassionate, completely blindsided like we were. Olivia reminds me of Tyler at that age, curious about everything, surprisingly wise. We're having dinner next week with Daniel and Tyler too. Is that okay?" "More than okay," I assured her. "It's wonderful." Life was reconfiguring itself in ways I never could have imagined. The family I had thought was complete, Robert, Jennifer, Daniel, Tyler, and me, was expanding to include Geneva and Olivia, possibly even Catherine and the mysterious Margaret Harris in Vermont. Not a traditional family by any means, but one bonded by shared experience, by the complicated legacy of loving the same deeply flawed man. 2 months after my arrival in Florence, I moved into my new apartment. Gabriella helped me settle in, bringing houseplants to brighten the space, and introducing me to neighbors in the building. I set up a small art studio by the north-facing window, arranged my Italian language books on a shelf, and placed Tyler's origami crane on my bedside table. That evening, sitting on my new small balcony with a glass of wine, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since discovering that first suspicious phone bill. Not happiness exactly, the wounds were still too fresh for that, but contentment, a quiet certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. My phone rang. Marcus calling with an update. "Mrs. Wilson, there's been a development," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Robert has agreed to a comprehensive plea deal. He'll plead guilty to multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, tax, evasion, and other charges in exchange for a reduced sentence." "How reduced?" I asked. "Significantly. Without the deal, he was facing potentially 30 years or more, essentially a life sentence at his age. With the plea agreement, he's looking at 12-15 years. Still a life sentence, essentially, for a man in his 70s. And the financial aspects? That's the other part of the deal," Marcus continued. "He's providing comprehensive financial records, including offshore accounts and hidden assets. This will expedite the asset recovery process for all parties involved." All parties meaning me, Geneva, Catherine, Eleanor, and this Margaret in Vermont? Exactly. The prosecutors are pushing for equitable distribution of recoverable assets among all the affected households, with priority given to restitution for outside investors who lost funds. It was a pragmatic resolution, though far from perfect. Many people, including me, would never recover everything they had lost financially. As for the emotional and psychological losses, those couldn't be quantified or compensated. When will this be finalized? I asked. Robert is scheduled to appear in court next week to enter his plea, Marcus replied. After that, the focus shifts to asset recovery and distribution. Your divorce will proceed on a parallel track, likely finalized within 6 months. 6 months. By then, my initial lease in Florence would be ending, requiring another decision about my future. Stay longer? Return to the States? Move somewhere else entirely? The uncertainty might have terrified me once, but now it felt like opportunity, the freedom to choose my path without constraints. Thank you for everything, Marcus, I said sincerely. I know this case has been unusual, to say the least. One for the record books, he agreed with a touch of dry humor. But seeing how you've handled it, Mrs. Wilson, with dignity and resilience, has been genuinely inspiring. After we hung up, I sat watching the sunset over Florence, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought me here. From finding that phone bill, to discovering multiple families, to rebuilding my life in Italy, all in just a few months. The old Margaret would never have believed herself capable of such adaptation, such reinvention. The old Margaret had defined herself primarily through her relationship to others, wife, mother, grandmother. The woman I was becoming defined herself differently, artist, teacher, explorer of new possibilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Just heard from Marcus about Dad's plea deal. How are you feeling about it? I considered the question carefully, checking in with my emotional state. To my surprise, I felt little reaction to the news of Robert's plea. It seemed remote, disconnected from my daily reality in Florence, from the person I was becoming. I'm at peace with it, I texted back honestly. His choices led to these consequences. My focus is elsewhere now. Jennifer replied, Mine too, strangely enough. Geneva and I were saying yesterday that the anger is fading faster than we expected. We're all too busy rebuilding to stay stuck in what he destroyed. Her insight resonated deeply. We were all rebuilding, different structures than before, perhaps but potentially stronger, more authentic ones. The foundations Robert had undermined were being replaced with new ones of our own careful design. I touched the key pendant at my neck, Libertà, and smiled. Freedom wasn't the absence of connections or commitments. It was the presence of choice, of agency in creating one's own life. At 70, with a failed marriage behind me and an uncertain future ahead, I had finally found that freedom. The passport that had remained hidden in my keepsake box for decades had been my first step toward liberation, a physical symbol of possibilities beyond the boundaries I'd accepted for so long. But the true journey had been internal, rediscovering the woman who had been there all along, waiting for the chance to emerge. Tomorrow, I would attend my watercolor class, work on curriculum development for the adult education program, perhaps meet Diane for coffee afterward. Simple activities that would have seemed foreign to the Margaret who had lived in Riverside for 50 years, but which now formed the comfortable rhythms of my new life. In 6 months, when my lease ended and my divorce was finalized, I would face new decisions. Stay in Florence? Explore another city? Perhaps even return to Connecticut with fresh perspective? The options were open, the choice entirely mine. For the first time in half a century, I was writing my own story, not as Robert's wife or as an extension of his narrative, but as the protagonist of my own unfolding life. It wasn't the story I had expected to live, but I was discovering that unexpected journeys often led to the most meaningful destinations. The sun set over Florence, painting the ancient city in hues of gold and rose. I raised my glass in a silent toast, to endings that became beginnings, to doors closed and windows opened, to the liberation that sometimes came only after heartbreak, to the passport that had waited patiently for 50 years, and to the woman who had finally found the courage to use it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.